The Dungeon Master Experience. This regular column is for dungeon masters who like to build worlds and campaigns as much as I do. Here, I share my experiences as a DM through the lens of Iomandra, my Dungeons & Dragons campaign world. Even though the campaign uses the 4th edition rules, the topics covered here often transcend editions. Hopefully, this series of articles will give you inspiration, ideas, and awesome new ways to menace your players in your home campaigns. If you're interested in learning more about the world of Iomandra, check out the wiki. Dungeon Master for Life, Chris Perkins.
Hello, and welcome back to this reading of the Dungeon Master Experience by Chris Perkins. Today, we're doing something a bit different. I will still be reading from Perkins' original article verbatim, but because the edition used in this series is 4th edition, this is one of the few instances in which translating the lessons herein may be inelegant or difficult for new DMs. So, what I will do is when Perkins goes over these aspects, I'm going to briefly refer to a somewhat simplified version of what Mike Shea from Lazy Dungeon Master suggests in his LazyDM's Companion. I will also leave a link in the description of where you can get this book, and would highly recommend supporting Mike Shea because he is an incredible repository of Dungeon Master advice. So, let's jump right in. Instant Monster. Monday night. Our heroes are 23rd level, fighting mind flayers aboard an Illithid vessel on the Dragon Sea. The mind flayers are tied to one of the campaign's big story arcs involving a war between the almighty Dragavar Empire, ruled by Dragonborn, and the upstart Marathon Regency, a vassal state of the Imperial Commonwealth that has declared its independence. It's a familiar tale with a D&D twist. Around 11th level, the heroes learned a major campaign secret. The Marathon Regency was being influenced by Mind Flayers and other forces from the Far Realm. Knowing that most Mind Flayers fall in the level of 18 to 20 range in 4th edition, my players started getting nervous by the time they reached 16th level. For my part, I'd expected Mind Flayers to start showing up around 19th or 20th level. As it turns out, through no fault of my players, the Monday Night heroes really didn't get around to fighting their first Mind Flayers until now. One of the dangers of running a complex campaign is that it's easy for the party to become involved in certain unfolding stories and not others. By the time Mind Flayers were back on the menu, the heroes had gained a bunch of levels. Consequently, the monsters I'd planned for them to fight were now several levels below the party average. Solving this problem demanded special DM ninja skills and took a lot less time than you might think. Welcome to the microwave dinner approach to monster design. By the end of this column, you will have a new DM superpower, the ability to create a monster of any level, on the fly, in 2 minutes or less. And by create, I mean customize. As much as I love creating new monsters from scratch, my favorite D&D activity in fact, outside of actually running a game, is usually unnecessary. Most players sitting on the other side of a DM screen can't tell the difference between a monster you've created from scratch and an existing monster that's been modified to suit your needs. So you should only have to create monsters from scratch when you have the time or want to try something weird. This article presents 2 simple and effective ways to customize monsters. Take a monster and adjust its level, turn a monster into another monster of the same level. The Perkinsian approach to adjusting a monster's level. My approach to adjusting a monster's level isn't mathematically perfect, but it serves the needs of most DMs. The ultimate goal is to tweak a monster so that it's level appropriate and doesn't cause the players to shout WTF during the game. This approach has 3 easy steps. For each level, you add or subtract. Increase or decrease the monster's defense and attack bonuses by 1. Increase or decrease the monster's hit points by 10, times 2 for elites, times 4 for solos. If you're feeling finicky, make sure that 6 for artillery and lurkers, 8 for controllers, skirmishers, and soldiers. Just remember this exercise is about easy math, not pinpoint accuracy. Increase or decrease the monster's damage by 1. If you're making a minion, its damage is usually around 4 plus 1/2 the monster's level. Minion brutes deal about 25% more damage on top of that. Reader perspective. Here is where you may be better served in 5th edition using the same ideas, but in the current system. You can continue to increase or decrease armor class and to hit bonuses as Perkins suggests, pretty simple. However, when it comes to HP, you have a few options. 1. Use the inbuilt HP range given. When you see a monster, for example, goblins, hit points 7, 2d6. This means a goblin's HP can range from 2 to 12. This range can help in simply powering up or down your goblins. 2 HP goblins and having lots of them can be a lot of fun, don't discount this. This can be done with any 5e stat block, and is actually the express purpose of the system. 2. A lazier method can just be halving or doubling the monster's average hit points. And 3, as an emergency situation, if your battle is going down far quicker than you thought, or not nearly as fast as you expected, you can reduce or increase the monster's HP mid-battle. You're likely to use this more often to end dragging fights, but sometimes as a new DM you simply underestimate how strong your player characters are. Monster damage. 1. If you're using average damage instead of rolling, just take a point in the range. Example, 2d6 is a 2 to 12 damage, a hit range. 2. You can also dial the damage by increasing or decreasing the damage die. You can do this both with the die choice itself, typically d4 to d12, and how many of them you have. It may make more sense to players if you flavor it with an effect rather than changing a standard weapon's damage. Maybe the ogre's mace is huge, so it deals 2d12 damage now, or the goblin's arrow has a low-grade poison and deals an extra 1d4. 3. Number of attacks. A desperate or enraged enemy may start swinging wildly and goes from 1 to 2 attacks, or you can change the number beforehand. You can also mix and match any of these suggestions above. Now back to Perkins. Don't bother adjusting the monster's initiative modifiers, skill modifiers, or ability score modifiers unless you are a stickler for detail. These sorts of changes have little discernible impact on a monster's combat performance, at least from a player's point of view. If the encounter warrants it, increase or decrease these values by 1 for every 2 levels you add or subtract, and be done with it. Here's the Dalgaunt Monk from the Eberron Campaign Guide, and the dirt simple level-adjusted version I used in the Mind Flayer adventure sprung on my players. If you wish to see the stat block, it will appear on the screen in front of you now. The Perkinsian approach to turning one monster into another. As Chris Perkins always says, you can't judge a monster by its level. At least most players can't. What makes a monster memorable is its shtick. In other words, the 1 or 2 powers and or traits that truly define what the monster does. As long as you're happy with the monster's attacks and powers, it doesn't matter where the rest of the stats came from. First, find a monster of the role and level you need, preferably one that has at least 1 attack power or trait worth keeping, and do the following. Give the monster a new name. Ignore any of the monster's powers or traits that are inappropriate or undesirable. If you're feeling creative, and only if you're feeling creative, give the monster a new trait or power, and by new, I mean something you've invented on a whim or something lifted from another critter. Having trouble finding a monster of appropriate role and level? Try surfing the creatures by level charts at the back of every 4th edition monsters book we've ever produced, or better yet, use the D&D Compendium online tool. I'll be the first to admit it. This approach to monster customization is the D&D equivalent of stealing someone else's homework, erasing the person's name, and writing your name on it instead. Appropriate behavior for your home campaign only. Here's the Infernal Giralon from Monster Manual 3 transformed into a Foul Spawn Terror Hulk for my Monday night campaign. Once again, you'll be able to find this up on the screen right now. The Two-Fang Strike of monster customization. If you feel like flexing your DM ninja skills, try using both approaches on one monster. Here's an example of a monster that I wanted to include aboard my Mind Flayer ship, but was the wrong level and a bit too complex for my tastes. A Dolgrim warrior is basically 2 goblins fused together, and I wanted a version to be a minion with traits that preserved the monster's shtick. The traits I ultimately gave the monster were inspired by the racial powers of elves and halflings. The end results. Once again, you can find this on the screen in front of you. Lessons learned. Use your newfound DM superpower freely and often, until it becomes as easy as breathing. Mastery comes quickly in very little time. You'll be able to customize monsters on the fly while still keeping your players on their toes. The truth is, you should never have to create a monster stat block unless you really want to. Don't believe me? Take any monster stat block that's been published and do the following. Write down the monster's name and a page reference, make a short list of the custom changes that you want to make to the monster, run the monster using the old stat block and your short list of notes. Your players will either believe you are running a monster right out of the book, or they'll think they're fighting something new. Either way, they're overjoyed and you didn't kill yourself in the process. Until the next encounter.
I want to thank all of you who have made it to the end of this video. This reading comes from Chris Perkins' Dungeon Magazine series, The Dungeon Master Experience, in which Chris gives excerpts of wisdom and lessons he's learned from many years of running games. If you're interested in reading it for yourself, you can find a link down in the description along with links to where you can find the music used in this video, which is a product of Critical Role's Scanlan Shorthalt Press.